Nate, I let the intro run a little longer, let people get into their seats, fill in. You know, the orchestra's warming up, and here we are, live on YouTube. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Nate Bauer here on the BWI Live Show. Welcome. I hope you're ready for some season preview material because, Nate, it's the 28th of June, which means we are like 4 weeks away from the start of Penn State football fall camp. You know, it happens in the middle of summer, but it's fall camp because as soon as that's done, the season starts. So the doorstep, we are standing on it right now.
Yeah, I felt I was so looking forward to summer. It was like a big point in my life where I was just like, man, I'm really ready for summer. And now it's half over, almost over. I don't know. Yeah. It just feels like it's really flown by. But to be honest with you, just given the subject matter, like let's pull back the curtain a little bit, right? We are tasked with being objective and right, non-partisan for football teams.
Yes,
but it is a different feeling as a journalist heading into a season where there are expectations for really two ends of the spectrum, right? Either 6-6 and just disaster. You're watching the train wreck, or extremely high expectations, right? Like things change. It's a little more dull when the expectation, 9-3, 8-4. What, you know,
right?
It's kind of ho hum, whatever.
But, I would say even the 10-2 expectations are ho hum at this point. Where Penn State, I understand we have the blip of 2020, 2021. But under James Franklin, 10 wins, like almost lock it in, 10 wins. And people are like, I don't care anymore. It's got to be 11, 12 wins.
I still look at, I guess having my perspective or seeing it the way that I do, I still see the grind of 10 wins. I still see 10 wins as being a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think you're wrong. And it just creates a little bit of a buzz, right? I mean, certainly I understand from fans' point of view, but if you're looking at it from our seat, where this is year 19 of me doing this, it's you know, the vibe, the ability to get juiced up for football season changes. I would say it fluctuates from year to year, but this year, I'm pretty juiced up. I think it's going to be a fun year to cover.
You know, it's funny, like football is my existence. And whenever I think about football season during the summer, there is a weariness, like a blanket that goes over me. And despite the fact that I love it, and I'm like, the adrenaline of even just all the things we have to do gets me jacked up. Like I like the pressure of all the things, but like in this moment, it's always that push and pull of there is a storm coming. And also there's a storm coming. So we're going to talk about what this team is going to be this year on the show today by previewing the top 5 position groups. You wrote about it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but I'm going to give my top 5 as a counter to yours, and we can argue about the merits of my top 5, or we can compare them both. The only, for people here on the show that know that I like to make all the fancy stuff, we don't have any graphics for Nate's top 5. And it's not because I'm selfish and I want to have my stuff shine. It's because I was trying to respect his work over at the website and not just blast it on the internet for everybody to see. So, Nate, we're going to get to that in just a little bit.
Yeah.
But your expertise, where your bread is buttered, is a front office insider. Getting all that information about the machinations of politics and money and NIL. So you wrote about this, I think, yesterday. There's a high-profile NIL event, is what you described it as, coming up. So can you just set the stage for us in what is one of the most important things in football right now with NIL?
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly James Franklin has made it clear over the last, really 2 years how important NIL is. And Penn State has had, I would describe it as kind of fits and starts, right? I mean, it's been some success, some kind of painful spots. And honestly, if you're on our premium message board, Sean Fitz is talking about it right now and some of the impacts that it has had in the recruiting front. So Penn State has this big event, right? July 27th in Avalon, New Jersey, which I understand there's been a little bit of I don't know, pushback is the word, disgruntled, but some fans, see this as like, well, it's not really very accessible to the metro Pittsburgh area, DC, right? Avalon is, if you're going to Avalon, you're going to Avalon. But the point is, this is like a big money donation, right? Tickets start at $2,000 for 2 hours with James Franklin. $3,000 for a couple. $5,000 gets you 2 tickets to the duration of the 4-hour affair. You and I aren't familiar with these things, T. Frank. These are not. We are not the audience for the We Are at the Shore. But guess what? And this is an important thing to remember. While we may not be, and some of our YouTube viewers, I'm just based on the likelihood of being a 1%er,
right? Literally, the statistics would say probably not.
Right. But the key thing to remember is there is an audience for that, right? There are people out there who are capable and willing to make that type of investment. In Penn State, at least its NIL operation, its NIL arm is counting on that happening. So this is a big, for the non-direct contribution from a business or an individual. This is the type of thing that I think is being seen as a gateway to opening up some funds on a bigger scale more quickly.
Yeah. How important is the success of this? The obvious question, but how important is the success of this particular event? And is this I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, is this, I haven't heard of this particular type of event before on this scale. Is this the first one they've done?
Well, it's so yes, look, there's a lot of ways to get things done. Okay. And so whether it's a personal phone call from James Franklin or the direct interaction, I mean, certainly we've seen Inch and Company in York have quite a bit of a social media presence featuring Penn State players, of which Penn State players have been, the recipients of their funding in a lot of ways for NIL opportunities. So like, that's a positive for Penn State football. That's a positive for those players. This broadens it a little bit, right? Instead of the 6-figure, 7-figure donation or 7-figure contribution, this is okay. Getting it down to 4 figures, but you can get some FaceTime with James Franklin, right? You can talk about this with James Franklin. There are going to be players there, past and present, including Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, all of those guys are going to be there. Some past players, I believe Kajana Carter is on tap, LeVar Arrington, I think, Mike Maudie. So there's a bunch of people who will be at this, and like that's the sell. That is, I think, ultimately the model that Penn State is going to have to settle in on. Is you can't just ask for a non-business arrangement and not expect to have to give something in return. Okay. And so whereas a business relationship where you're donating and you get whatever faces on billboards, whatever it is, that relationship,
contractual thing, right?
Contractual thing. Like, that's one thing. This is something different. This is an opportunity to get yourself in front of the stakeholders, right? The prime players, and you're not going to get an advertising deal. There's not going to be that type of arrangement on the backside of this, but you get to hang out with them for 4 hours. And so that may seem like a costly endeavor to some people, but to other people it won't be, and it'll be an opportunity that they look forward to and take advantage of. So it'll be interesting. It'll be super interesting to see what the turnout is, what type of reception it gets, in Avalon next month.
Fits and starts is kind of how it feels like Penn State's NIL situation is going. And depending on how things are going in that particular month might be the temperature of how Penn State feels about its NIL situation based on, just that's my read based on what you've talked about and what we've heard kind of through the grapevine. So how would you describe Penn State's NIL situation as it's developed I don't want to go all the way back to where Pat Kraft started, but the recent updates, how would you describe how things are going from what you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, progress is being made. You have to enter it with the understanding that it's a hamster wheel. there is no finish line to this.
Right.
Whatever, there is no enough, right? Like the Ryan Day $13 million figure that was last summer's news that everyone kind of gawked at and was like aghast over $13 million. Well, there will never be a point where it's like, oh, well, we've hit this. And so now we don't have to try anymore. As long as we hit this number and keep going at this number, we're going to be fine. That's not the reality. This is an arms race in many respects. And the more you have, the more effective you are at generating those funds.
Yeah.
The more leeway you have, right? The
Right.
better opportunity you have to bring in the personnel at this point that you need in college football to compete. So it's not, I mean, but look, it's sorry to cut you off, but it's
Sure.
just, it's a world away from the intention of we're going to do something totally different where we educate our student athletes how to be entrepreneurs.
Right.
Right. Like that was the initial endeavor.
Yeah.
This is something totally different from that. And on the NIL scale, it's important that this is the move that Penn State is making.
I had this conversation about defensive tackles earlier this week, and how we talked about that. We put up the weight gains from the most recent update on the Penn State official roster, and a bunch of guys got bigger, and then it becomes like, okay, well, they're ready to go now, right? Like now they're good at football, and it's not necessarily like that. It's one thing. It's NIL is a part of the picture. James Franklin, his coaching staff, the administration, they just need to be competitive, right? Then everything else that Penn State has to offer is valid. But if you're not in this part of the game, I guess I don't want to simplify it down into NIL is the only thing that matters, because that's not exactly true either, right?
It's not at all. Look, this is a side dish that is important to have on the menu. You know, when you go to like a fancy steakhouse and the sides are a la carte, you don't order any and they bring out the plate and it's just this $100 steak or whatever it is, but it's literally just a steak sitting in the middle of the plate and there's nothing else with it.
You and I have different lives.
Nobody.
No,
in
but
any case,
I can't eat out. That's the thing. But yes, I know what you're talking about. Like, you got to go and you've got to those places and peruse the menu for what you want.
And you have to. You're looking for all of those things, right? You're not going to order a million things, but it's just important to have something with the steak. And in Penn State's case, the steak is culture, okay, and development, player development. That is what Penn State sells. Penn State as a football program is able to say, look, we can put guys in the NFL. We take them from 4 stars, low or high 3 stars, whatever you want to say, but it is repeated success of development, guys who were not on track to be first round NFL draft picks. Jahan Dotson, right? Like that's a case of developing a player and turning him into that. And the examples are endless, right? Olu Fashanu he wasn't going to be that. And now he's going to be a first round draft pick. So you have all of those examples. That's what Penn State sells. Okay. That's great. And that's a wonderful part of the meal. But hey, if I'm going to a fancy restaurant and I really want to have the whole experience, I want to side with it. And that's NIL.
What's your side? What's your side? Because I'm thinking like the thing that pops into my head is a really nice Caesar salad. What's your side with the steak?
Oh, wow.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, man. Now I'm thrown out. To be honest with you, just because it's so intensive and I don't make them myself, I like a baked potato. It's a time intensive process to make a good baked potato.
Nate, you're the king of crock pots. You just poke it with a fork and put it in a crock pot with some foil for like 4 hours. That's it.
Stop. No, that's not. Anyway.
Brandon Templin checking in from California, the BWI live show, as it was intended, a morning show in the Pacific.
Wow.
So awesome that we have the reach all the way over to California. Mike, regular here on the show, He's here with us this morning. Glad to have everybody here. The BWI Live mailbag coming up in just a little bit. So if you've got any questions, we got a couple. Josh has a question in the chat we'll be getting to later in the show. If you want to get a question on the air, the best way that we make sure we get your question is if you donate to the channel with a super chat, big old fancy thing on my system here, and then I can throw it on the screen. I see it. We absolutely get to it. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to get to the other questions. Great questions get on the show. So that's coming up in just a little bit. Always a great time to remind you, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, because we just mentioned the season is coming. There's going to be just a downpour of information, shows. We're going to be adding some shows in the fall. So this is going to be, we're going to be live a little bit more here on YouTube. You don't want to miss the changes in the format. So subscribe. And if you hit the notification button, you'll get notifications whenever we go live or there's breaking news or we upload videos. You just get plugged into all of our stuff. And, of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Right now, there is no special. I love telling you about the specials. Right now, there's not a special for BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But here's the deal. The information that Nate was just referencing, his NIL information, Fitz and Ryan, what they've been able to do over the last decade of their careers, getting you plugged into Penn State recruiting, that is well worth the money. And you can have conversations with other people, like-minded people about Penn State football, basketball, wrestling, everything at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on the Lions Den message board. So sign up. Worth it.
Can I throw in one addendum to all of that, T. Frank, that I think
Sure.
is important, that I don't think we stress enough? Join the community, right? Like not just the like-minded, like it is a robust group of people who have differing perspectives, different life experiences, but everybody coming into the same place and being able to talk about things that they like, which to me is one of the heavier draws of what our site is and what I think it's becoming.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you get to, here on the show, you get to tell me that Caesar salad is an awful take on what you're going to get with your steak.
Thanks, Mike.
Here's the thing. You're right. I'm not used to having to choose between a baked potato and a Caesar salad. Usually the places I go, you get steak fries, and then I order the Caesar salad. It's just also heavy. I like to have something a little light with the steak. And, green beans. Here's another great one. Green beans go great with a steak, especially if you slather them in butter, salt, and pepper.
Okay.
It's something like steak and potatoes, guys, is so trite.
Yeah, I get
We've
that.
done it a million times.
I know, but we could do a steamed broccoli. We could do asparagus. Listen, I love fresh vegetables.
Asparagus is great. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right.
I just made an asparagus soup yesterday. That was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Quick thing we need to tell you about. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com here. The live show, our football show, is powered by RogueShop.com, and they've got a great deal going on right now. Right now at Rogue Shop, you can get 20% off on all edibles. RogueShop.com, promo code, use the discount code BWI20. They've got all kinds of new stuff, including their strongest edibles yet, which can help you with a lot of different things. I use them personally for sleep. These are the latest gummies. They sent them over here so I could show you them. Slap Yo Mama. These are not messing around. So make sure you are taking them with the recommended dosages from Rogue Shop, because they give you information with every box where they let you know, hey, this is what you need. Here how much you take. Dial it in. And they'll even, you go to RogueShop.com. They'll help you pick out the stuff that you need, and your dosage level and all of those things, because they're committed to sustainable plant medicine to help you live a better life with all the maladies that come with modern life, including insomnia and overstimulation, fatigue, adrenal fatigue, all these things that happen in our lives right now because we're staring at screens and lights and you're constantly on the internet, all that stuff that can just diswire your nervous system. They can help you with all that stuff. So RogueShop.com. Use the promo code BWI20 until July 6th to get 20% off all edibles. And thanks again to RogueShop.com for being a sponsor here on the BWI live show. Nate, Penn State basketball, another area of your expertise. You got to commit in 2024. So tell us about the latest Nittany Lion.
They did late Monday night. Javin Carter, who is a 6'3", 6'2", some people say 6'2", but I'm going to go with 6'3" because that's what he says he is. 6'3" combo guard out of Alcoa, Tennessee. if me saying Tennessee and you're a Penn State basketball fan, if Tennessee sounds like, well, it's with good reason. Penn State has not recruited that area much, I would say. But, look, I think that this is a kid who Penn State had understood, right? Like it felt like it was in on early, offered a scholarship to on June 16. Mike Rhodes went down to see him during the evaluation period last Friday night. He caught him play. And kid made a decision quickly, right? It's not one that is like, he's not rated, ranked, any of that stuff. He doesn't have those accolades yet. But for a class of 2024 kid, it gets the process rolling. It gets the ball rolling. I think, in a way that Penn State is satisfied with. Penn State's happy with to have a kid that they feel like they got in before other people started to notice him. He's won, right? He won a state championship in Tennessee at the Class 2A level. He was a player of the year, I believe, in his region, and he was an all-state player. So has a lot of things that Penn State likes, and certainly they'll expect to be able to see him continue to ascend through over the next year, really.
So we'll keep up to date on that in the class of 2024. Nate Bauer at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com has all that information about Penn State basketball and the Mike Rhodes era, regime. Regime always makes it sound like they're like heads on pikes outside of castles.
It's a Russian dictator.
Yeah.
No, it's a tenure.
I appreciate that. I like that better. Tenure. The Mike Rhodes tenure at Penn
State. It's academia, T. Frank.
We always do like it's so true. Like you're sitting here and you're like, what's the right word to use? And my brain sometimes when I get stuck is you go through all of the words that you've heard, and I'm like, I don't like any of those. Tenure sounds phenomenal. Let's get to today's headline, which is Penn State's top 5 position groups. Because, Nate, you wrote about this over BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's a very talented, stacked team. Some years it's obvious. This year, I don't think it's so obvious. So how do you want to handle this? How do you want to go back and forth? Do you want to react to mine? Do you want to react to yours? What do you want to do here with our dueling top 5s?
Yeah. Well, let's see here. We have some overlap for sure. So let's just start with the one that doesn't overlap, right?
Okay.
Which is at the 5th most talented position group. I have the tackles, the offensive tackles.
The offensive tackles. I went with the safeties. That was a very long intro on that graphic.
Yeah.
I did not time that well.
I like it.
So the Penn State safeties, I have at number 5. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's get all heated and debatey. Put on your best Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless. Why are you saying the tackles? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Whoa. Relax. No, so look, I think that when you have a guy who's a potential top 10, 15 pick in the NFL draft at a position that has not been it has not procured that type of talent at Penn State, I think it deserves some level of recognition. And it goes beyond that, because I think that Caden Wallace is you never know until you see it, right? And I get where you're going, and I understand we've had these conversations. But
we're going to have him later in the mailbag.
Yeah, well, Caden's off season has been really strong. Like bottom line. And so some guys, it happens at different points in their career. Maybe it's just a situation where he is limited, right? Like maybe that's your evaluation of him, and he just hasn't gotten better. And I don't know. Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying that the feedback internally, the perceptions that have crossed my path since really the spring have all been geared towards Caden Wallace having a really, really good spring.
Yeah.
So when you pair those two guys, when those are your two bookends who should be, in Olu's case, elite, and in Caden's case, very good to great, with a backup in Drew Shelton that has some experience, some rising talent that they were really excited. Like, it's important for me, regardless of how Drew played last season, when he stepped in and stepped up, and like he got a lot of attention for that. But I think that you and I both saw behind that as like, well, there were some struggles there too. There were some not great performances. But for me, it's remembering how excited Phil Troutwine was about Drew Shelton last August, right? Like the stuff was already there. There was already evidence that he was a kid who was going to be in a position to play early. And I think having that experience under his belt, now he can play well. Now he can turn the corner from just playing to playing well. So to have three tackles, I feel like that deserved a nod in that fifth spot.
Yeah. Valid thoughts, all wrong. Not really well thought out, actually. And now that I think about it, like, how dare you? You've insulted the community of people that you represent so fervently. And I just wanted to say that, like, you should be ashamed of yourself and your family. Like, you've shamed your family. Sure. And also, how dare you? I don't know. I don't know how to do this, Nate. I don't know how to do this.
We're doing it.
Here's the thing. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I also heard that about Caden Wallace last year. And I leaned into that where he talked about the areas he needed to get better. He, and was, based on, what I've seen of him on film, those were the areas he needed to get better, and didn't really manifest itself during his play early in the season. Then of course he got hurt. So, it's still an open question to me. I am fully willing to accept that he got better this offseason. But what percentage of that gets him to average, to good, or great? And, I guess I'm not willing to go as far as saying that he is now good. Like, he is now above that in certain areas, because there are areas where he was deficient that, based on what I've seen of him, it's going to take a lot for him to round that corner in certain specific areas of his game. But more than any of that, and not even to talk down on Caden Wallace, it's just that for me, the safety position, there are no questions. There are no weaknesses in that group. You've got 4 players that can start, 4 players that will play, and I see fewer guys that I have questions about. So you have one more player for right tackle, left tackle, free safety, strong safety, field boundary, whatever you want to say. We got 4 players instead of 3. That's why. It's number 4 on my list or number 5 on my list, because a little bit deeper, and we have more proven starting talent, except blah 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 at that position.
Tight ends probably also deserve a mention.
Ooh, yeah. Hey, how about this? If you've got a top 5, you want to throw it in the chat and prove both of us wrong, do that. Or if you're watching on a replay, leave it in the comments, your top 5, because of course I based mine off of a counter to Nate's, and I didn't. Spoiler alert: tight ends aren't in here.
But I think there's valid that 5th spot got a little hard. I expected it to be sort of a relatively seamless and easy exercise, but no, it's interesting. This is an interesting team that Penn State has this season.
Yeah. I'll go with my number 4 to start here. T. Frank's top 5 position groups. Coming in at number 4, linebackers. And this is an area where you and I agree that the outside linebackers specifically, this group, from what they were last year to this year, dramatically changed, where they actually have the talent and the depth and is a strength of the team.
Yeah, I think that for whatever reason, and maybe this is my perception, I don't know if everybody else thinks this or not, but like, I think Curtis Jacobs gets overlooked quite a bit, actually, right?
Yep.
I understand Abdul Carter is the hype train and warranted. He's really good, made great plays last year, and has so much room to get better. He's a guy, right? He's a dude. I think Curtis Jacobs got a lot better from one half of the season last year to the second half. I thought he was much improved in the second half of the season, more productive, made more plays, just was a better player. And so when you can parlay that into a senior season where he's comfortable out there, you have Abdul Carter on the same field at the same time, and as they were last year, I mean, right? Like, that's kind of the interesting thing, is that shift was happening concurrent to Abdul's climb. And so when you get that for another go round, I think they have the potential and the opportunity to be pretty good. like on its face, and then also have depth and insurance behind that has the opportunity to also be very good.
I actually wrote about this earlier this week. Talked to Curtis Jacobs at Lift for Life. By the way, fan of the show. We're trying to get him back on the show here before the start of the season. Him doing what he did last season in the middle of the year, and I go into the details of what, like, the context of moving to allow Abdul Carter to have a bigger role on the team, and how much of a sacrifice I viewed that as, given it was, as you mentioned, his third year, COVID eligibility. He's still a junior, so he's got more time, but guys want to go to the league, and he gave up a prime spot in the defense in order for them to be better. And this year, he's coming in bigger, faster, stronger. I think not more dedicated, because he's always been a dedicated guy to getting better, but having that next opportunity, that next level of focus and that next level of preparedness. I think the biggest question is, it's been all off season, how do you get those two guys on the field at the same time and maximize their impact? Because at times, him playing that other outside linebacker position, just the nature of those two positions, the box linebacker it is the more impactful role. So who do you put there, and how do you get two guys that have that skill for that position on the field at the same time and allow them both to have impact in equal ways without having, it's always competition, right? So somebody is going to take a step, somebody's going to have the more of that. But how do you get those guys on the field at the same time, maximize their impact when both of them fit in the same position? I think pretty well. Let's go to number 3, because again, I think I switched these up though, actually. So I'll go with my number 3, which is going to make some people angry. But again, we're here for Shock Jock Radio today. Running backs coming in at number 3, not number 1. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. That's great, Nate. But what about the depth? I understand Trey Potts is here, but you got two excellent football players. If you examine the depth of this team, that's one of the talents of the other positions. You got two guys, and I think Trey Potts can come in and provide a role. But if those guys go down, is what you got. And so I put him at number 3 because just depth and be contrarian.
I think that's. Listen. I
no, you don't. You don't think that's fair. You don't think that's. No,
fine. I do. I do think it's fair, and I do think it's fine. You can't force me.
All right.
Look, he's. I think having that quality at 1 and 2 is rare. I don't think you see that quite a bit. You know, and so to have both of those guys in that position, I think sets them up extraordinarily well. They were number 1 among my position groups, just because I think so highly of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And I do think that with Trey Potts, like you've gotten to a point with him where he's got something to play for sure. Okay. After having some success earlier in his career, gets a fresh start, a fresh opportunity. I think that is, you can't necessarily count on a return to form, but it's an interesting dynamic going into the season. But yeah, I just, that's why the number 1 for me is that Nick Singleton and Katron Allen they do different things, and both of those things are extremely valuable to Penn State.
We got to blow through the top 2 here because we got to get you out here in a couple of minutes. I still want to leave enough time for the mailbag, so I'm going to go through my top 2 because I think it's also going to be illuminating. And once you get to number 2, like number 1 becomes obvious. So coming in at number 2 for me in T. Frank's top 5 position groups, we are going with the Penn State cornerbacks, and then at number 1. The position that is the deepest, the strongest, the most talented, that has future NFL players at it, is defensive end. And this is why running back came in number 3. Because if I go through this list of players and say, okay, Nick Singleton, is Kalen King better or worse than Nick Singleton in terms of talent at his position, potential at his position? Same thing with Chop Robinson and Dennis-Sutton at defensive end. And when you look at the top end talent in those positions, and then Cam Miller, another guy I don't think we're talking about enough, where he was so good this spring that Storm Duck decided to transfer. He didn't feel like he was going to be a part of the conversation at corner because Cam Miller had asserted himself so much. So those positions have the high-end talent and unbelievable depth at defensive end. I did better or worse, the Penn State defensive ends. They were good last year. But I think this can be the best group ever under James Franklin. This could be one of the best groups in the country if Dennis-Sutton takes a major step forward. So
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, that's my list.
Give me a Johnny Dixon mention as well. Got to get his name in there for the cornerbacks. I had cornerbacks at 3. I just think that as starters, they're really good, but they have backups that are extremely talented as well. So that's a position group that I'm excited to see this year. And yeah, like you said, defensive end. I mean, they were number 2 for me, number 1 for you. When Dennis-Sutton is your backup, right? Because presumably they're only going to start 2 defensive ends.
That's usually how it works. Yeah.
That's the presumption. But when he is your backup defensive end, that will lead to, I think, some pretty outrageous productivity and some great play. Manny Diaz, just having a conversation with him this summer for our magazine, we did an interview. He, and we know this, okay, but hearing it verbalized from him just brings a clarity to it that it's such a double-edged sword for for opponents of Penn State, because if the defensive ends and the cornerbacks are working in tandem at such a level that
that's where you get elite defenses. That's
exactly.
where you get elite, where you get the interceptions, you get all of these things. That's why when you're looking at recruiting, and Penn State is, I think they need to get a guy at defensive end in the next class. Somebody has to fit for Penn State this year where they got that high-end elite potential, because you don't want to drop off. You don't want to lose what you have right now on defense, which is a combination of pass rush and coverage that makes it really hard for teams. I want to run through a couple of these we got here in the chat, so we'll get some top 5. Matthew says DN's number 1, corners, running backs, linebackers, and safeties. Josh says secondary, going with the whole secondary, D-line, linebackers, tight ends, and then O-line. And then Eli bringing it in with 2 quarterbacks, linebackers, O-line, wide receivers coming in at number 5, and he has running backs number 1. And then, of course, Mike here with linebackers number 1, running backs, defensive tackles, and tight ends secondary. So that is the chat's view of what we got in the top 5. I am going to smash on right to our mailbag because we got to get to your questions now. Okay, so we got to run through a couple of these pretty quickly, but this is, I think, the biggest one we could discuss today. Ear to the ground from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com's Lions Den message forum. A great way to get a question on the show is to subscribe and throw your question in the mailbag thread. He says, I keep hearing that Caden Wallace has his best spring ever. Also heard he's packed on the pounds. This has been a common theme, Nate. He's up to 341 pounds, and despite the fact that everyone wants football players to be bigger, now suddenly Caden Wallace seems to be all of concern that he's even slower. Should we be encouraged or discouraged by Caden Wallace's reports over the summer? You are encouraged based on our conversation in the last segment. I just want to say this, and then I'll turn it over to you. If a football player for Penn State is getting bigger, they are not getting fat. The strength and conditioning staff knows what they're doing. So if they're getting bigger, it is valuable muscle density. It is not that they're getting big and chunky. So Caden Wallace should be bigger, faster, stronger, despite his size, in varying degrees, right? So, there are diminishing returns. But if that's where his body has landed and that's what they've decided for him, I have no problem with Caden Wallace being 340.
Yeah, I actually had an interview with him earlier this week. He felt good. That wasn't part of the conversation. We didn't talk about his size, but there's nothing to suggest from that conversation that he is in any way feeling out of sorts over it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And so the conversation to me about Caden Wallace, like we had before, is just, I don't know that size is going to change necessarily what he was good or bad at last year. And in the previous years, like his lateral agility, his ability to get to reach blocks, his ability to pass protect in obvious passing situations. I understand the concern about being larger and then having those deficiencies to begin with, but here's the flip side of it. One of the reasons Drew Shelton played so well last year is because Penn State's running game was strong enough that they could mask some of these issues on the offensive line. They were able to run the football and get effective down and distances where they weren't always in obvious passing situations. So Caden Wallace being bigger and stronger, in getting into double teams better, being able to create more yardage in the run game, maybe kind of like Michigan's offensive line last year, their deficiencies aren't going to show up until you force them to throw the football. And in those situations, if you mitigate the opportunities, for mistakes. So with Caden Wallace, maybe he doesn't get necessarily better in the areas that he's worse, but he got better in the areas that he's good, and you can overcome some of those things from situational opportunity, I think is one of the things, because that's the biggest thing is flexible lateral agility. And I don't know, I haven't seen him play enough to say yes or no in terms of has he gotten better at those particular things. Size doesn't affect those things necessarily.
We will find out soon.
Yeah, we need to find out sooner rather than later, because the off season is getting into the 11th hour. This question here, PSU 1986, new member at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Want to welcome him. Don't know how you got the handle PSU 1986. That feels like that would have been one that would have been gone a while ago. Anyway, he says, which year do players make their biggest jump? As freshman to sophomore or sophomore to junior? Any concerns about Penn State's talented freshman class with a sophomore slump? Nate, what do you think?
I think it's different, right? Like I would love to generalize, but I can't say. I've seen lots of freshmen who have limited impact as true freshmen become very impactful in their second year in the program. But certainly you've seen guys who are slower to develop, and it's not even just sophomore to junior; it's junior to senior, right? There's every path. So I don't. I choose neither. But in regards to concerns over a sophomore slump, no, I don't think so, because I don't think that any of those guys, right? The reputation, and when I say those guys, I'm talking about Singleton, Katron Allen, Dennis-Sutton, Abdul Carter, right? Like those are kind of the primary four that we saw a ton of last year. All of those guys have these reputations as being like psycho workers. They're dedicated. They didn't let it go to their heads. So no, I don't think that is really a concern with that group. And then you just have to see what you get from everybody else.
Yeah. I would say part of a sophomore slump, and Manny Diaz talked about this this spring when he just in general talking about linebackers or the defense, is like, okay, so you set a level of play last year. That's no longer good enough because we want to improve. But part of the idea of a sophomore slump is when you come out the gate, you're good, but you don't necessarily improve, and now your opponent knows about you. You're not an unknown quantity. So Nick Singleton's a known quantity now. Has he improved his game enough where teams focus on him and he can still make plays? And as you said, psychotic workers. Dennis-Sutton is an intense dude. So even as a guy that didn't play and start and have a massive role last year, that's what we're talking about in terms of work ethic, getting better, and that's how you avoid kind of that sophomore slump. Josh asked this question: is Manny Diaz going to use Abdul Carter like the Cowboys used Micah Parsons? I think yes and no. The Cowboys are actually planning on using Micah Parsons basically as a full-time defensive end. They switched to that last year. He's too impactful as a pass rusher, so he's going to play less off-ball linebacker. Abdul Carter's an off-ball linebacker that can blitz, but if you talk to any of the Penn State defenders, it's all about pass rush. Doesn't matter if it's Curtis Jacobs or Kobe King or Jair Brown. Jalen Reed talked about this year. They all say getting to the quarterback can change your life, is the way Tig Brown talked about it. So it's not just Abdul Carter. The whole defense. He has democratized pass rushing. But yes, they will use Abdul Carter in a similar way in terms of using him, I don't want to say as a full-time hybrid defensive end, but as a guy that rushes the passer, because that is a skill of his, and it's a skill in the defense that's highly valuable. What you got?
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Ditto. Yeah. Sure.
Let's have I think that'll have to be our last question of the day, because Nate has to get out of here today. Apologize for a little bit of a shorter show, but things happen, and we have to get going a little bit early today. So Nate, Thank you for your time. Thank you for playing injured today, by the way. Always appreciated you here on the show.
Thanks as always for having me. I can't wait to do it again next week.
We will do it again next week, and we'll have actually, I don't know about that, because next week, believe it or not, I'm doing this thing called vacation. I think it's French. So I won't be here Wednesday. Nate, if you want to do the show, be my guest. More than willing to do the show.
See you in 2 weeks, folks.
We'll talk to you later here on the BWI Live show.